2022, we spent about 800 million. We bought Casuarina Square up here, which is the largest single shopping centre holding since 2010.
And how's Casuarina Square been going? Given we have had a lot of social issues up here, Casuarina unfortunately is always in the headlines with kids causing trouble there. Has that been an unintended sort of feature of your acquisition, or were you sort of always aware of periphery social issues when you bought Casuarina?
Well, they were there.
Yep.
They didn't just appear after we bought it. We have the same problem in Queensland. It certainly appears that the judiciary is more concerned with the rights of the criminals than they are of the public.
Hey guys, I was checking out our data for the last month and realised that over 90% of the people watching our videos are not yet subscribed. If you've ever found value in our videos or enjoyed the conversations, hit that subscribe button now. It really helps our channel more than you can imagine, and it's the only thing I'll ever ask from you. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Warren Ebert, thanks for joining us on the NextGenNorth podcast.
Thanks very much, Stuart. Pleasure to be here.
Mate, last time we talked to you, I think you were here around the time of the Origin. Were you proud of the way the Queensland boys acquitted themselves, or could they have done more?
Absolutely disgraceful. I'm ashamed.
Okay.
But you can't win all the time. If you win all the time, the opposition won't turn up. So you've got to give them some heart and think they've got a chance. So
right.
We did that with this one, and it'll be on again next year.
We move on?
Yep.
So I noticed that Casuarina Square moniker on your shirt there. Is that what brings you to Darwin this time, or is it a regular thing?
We come up here every month, Stuart. We've got about 600 million invested in Darwin.
Yep.
So Casuarina Square is our biggest investment, and we've got 3 substantial office complexes, and we've got some industrial and some smaller retail. And we want to continue to invest in the Darwin area because I think it's got a massive future. Yep. Although you wouldn't know it, by the last 3 years there's been no growth here, but that's another story.
Yep.
But we come up here every month. So we have a major investment. We've got 1.3 billion invested in Mackay North. So we like to visit our assets on a monthly basis.
Yep. And so is the north of Australia a big part of your, I guess, portfolio strategy going forward, or is it just something that you're going to sit on for a little while and just get those, or hopefully see those capital gains come in?
Well, both. We certainly hope to see the capital gains come in, but the wealth for Australia is being built in Northern Australia.
Right.
Sydney and Melbourne, they just clip the ticket. There's not much mining there. There's some manufacturing, but the real wealth that keeps the country going, the iron ore, the coal, the natural gas, that's all in Northern Australia and will be for decades and decades to come. And then you've got the rural, the agricultural, whether it's the cotton that's now expanding up the Northern Territory, the beef, the sugar cane in North Queensland. While we don't have the population base in Northern Australia, that's where the wealth for Australia is being built. And then we've got the defence bases that are happening. Townsville is the biggest defence base in Australia and still growing, and Darwin is getting bigger, and we're getting more countries come into Northern Australia to have bases.
Yep. Do you see sort of geopolitically Darwin and the north of Australia in particular becoming more and more, I guess, critical, with infrastructure development, defence spend, that sort of thing, particularly with things that are going on in the South China Sea at the moment and that type of thing? And does Sentinel Property Management hope to play a role in any of that, leverage that in any way it can?
Yes, to all of those. At the last, the NATO conference in Brussels last year, which was when our Prime Minister hadn't been in too long, NATO announced that they want to have a presence in the Asia Pacific.
Yep.
Well, for NATO to have a presence in the Asia Pacific, they just don't send a ship over when it runs out of fuel, go home again. Mm-hmm. They have to have a base. So if you have a look at the Asia Pacific region, where else can you go really apart from Australia? That all the other countries have numerous other, social issues or religious issues or whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
So Australia is the safest place for all of those countries to come.
Yep.
And have a base. You've also got to be far enough away from where the perceived trouble would be. Whether that's China, North Korea. You need to be far enough away. Japan is actually the previous Japanese ambassador wrote a paper and said that Japan needs to have a substantial base some distance from Japan. So, at the moment when North Korea does their missile tests, the missiles actually go over Japan.
Right.
Well, if they happen to run out of fuel or be, they could just drop on Japan. So Japan has to be far enough away so they can retaliate.
Yep.
Well, in Japan, if they launch from North Korea, by the time they see it, it's probably too late.
Yep.
So, of course, we hope that never happens, but the best way to ensure you don't have problems is to be prepared for it. So, I certainly think that when you read those articles that Japan will have a substantial base in Northern Australia, and there's probably not a lot of options. You need to go somewhere that has got infrastructure. They can't go and just pull up on a beach somewhere and set up a big facility. You've got to have power and you've got to have water and you've got access to fuel and you've got to have a population base. So there's certainly a limited number of locations where that could be, and I've got a reasonable idea, but it's not for me to speculate.
Okay, well, we might delve into some of that in a bit. So apologies for that. That was a bit of a technical hiccup. But what we like to do on this podcast is we like to get a bit of context about our guest and, what your journey is to have become, where you are now. I understand you've had a few different roles in life. You've maybe lived a few different lives. I understand you might have even been a taxi driver at one stage as well. Can you sort of just give us a little bit of an idea about what your journey's been to become the creator of the Sentinel Property Group, what Sentinel Property Group is, what its function is, who it serves, that type of thing, from maybe more modest beginnings?
Certainly modest beginnings, Stuart. I went to grade 10 and I did actually pass my grade 10 exam, so it wasn't a complete failure.
Right.
But back then, you were going to become a mechanic or a bricklayer or something like that. It was really a trade.
Yep.
Trade-based culture back then. Where now we have, if you don't go to university, there's something wrong with you. But now we're starting to see that we actually need the trades.
Yep.
They're respectable, honest jobs, and people can earn a lot of money out of it. And actually, that's where we have a real shortcoming. So I was a apprentice panel beater. I was in the horse business for a few years, and then used to buy and sell horses in Australia and New Zealand and take them to America.
Right.
And then I had a cab for about 7 or 8 years, and then I got into the property. I picked a fellow up at Expo House in 1988, and anyway, he thought I knew a bit about property, which I didn't. I just used to read a lot, and I have a pretty good memory.
Yep.
So from there, I got a job at LJ Hooker, and then that's where I am now. So it's
so was that selling real estate?
Yeah, selling commercial real estate.
Okay.
I never got into residential. I just don't like residential. It's just painful.
Okay.
You're dealing with emotions. Where in commercial, retail, industrial, the decisions are really made with the calculator.
Right.
And that's what I like doing. So it's been very good. Yep. I was in real estate working with the development company, and I decided in 2006 that I wanted to have a couple of years off from the end of 2008. And I thought that the property market was getting too crazy, and they made the decision in July 2006 to be out of by Christmas 2008. Now, as it turns out, that was the start of the GFC.
Yep.
So I was fortunate that I sold every commercial property I had, the last one being sold September 2007. Mm-hmm. And the market, I didn't see a GFC coming, but you just have... what people forget about property cycles is that they actually go in a cycle. Mm. When they get up the top, they come down, and when they're down, they go up. And you can't always get it 100% right. It's like the stock market. But if you can get within 10% either side, that's as good as you should be hoping for. So, I suppose a bit of good luck that I got out of it at the right time. But you've actually got to take the action. Mm. And over since I bought the first property under Sentinel in 15th of January 2010, we've bought a bit over $3 billion and well over 100 properties. And when we were buying in 2010, which was still in the worst of the GFC, the Dow hit the bottom on the 14th of March 2009. Mm-hmm. Now, it's only when you look back in a couple of years that you actually know where the bottom was.
Sure.
You don't know at the time.
Yep.
But it was... probably a lot of people listening to this mightn't even remember the GFC, but it was terrible. Mm. You had Lehman Brothers went down, and a lot of people thought the financial world was just really coming to an end.
Yep.
The COVID was just absolutely nothing. And because what happened with the GFC, that's why the world governments decided we can't let the same thing happen, because the US government should have stepped in and stopped Lehman Brothers going down, and they didn't, and then that caused the contagion effect, which just wiped hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars off the stock markets and everything else. So I find if you do what everyone else does, you end up where everyone else is.
Sure.
Doesn't matter what that is. If you want to be in a different place, whether you're a singer or a race car driver or in the financial area, you have to do it differently. And if you're doing it differently, most people criticise you. They just say it's you're crazy. It won't work. You'll lose all your money. And I had all of those things.
Sure.
So, and if people you respect say it, it probably hurts. But I didn't respect them anyway.
Yep.
So, you see in those difficult times, that's when they all sit around the coffee shops complaining, the banks wouldn't lend me more money, the government did this wrong. They don't accept that they actually had paid too much for an asset at the wrong time.
Yep.
So, I just took a different view that things were difficult. And there's another great Warren Buffett. I remember seeing him in 2008. I think it was 2008, saying, hang on. Can I get a water?
Yeah, Jamie, do you mind just grabbing Warren a water? Thanks, mate. We can edit that out. It's all good.
Yep. Excuse me. Excuse me. Okay, where are we up to? Another great Warren.
Warren Buffett. Yep.
We're right? Okay.
All good.
There's another great Warren Buffett. And I remember when, I think it was 2008, when the market was just terrible. He was on TV saying that America's best years are ahead of it. And at that time, I think people might have thought that the government was just putting up to it, but that was actually the case.
Was he not just trying to, reassure investors and people like that are invested in Berkshire Hathaway, do you think?
Well, I'm quite sure that's part of it.
Yep.
But the fellow hasn't got to where he is by just saying things
flippantly
that aren't true.
Yep.
Sure. I think certainly wanting to give them some comfort, but he was right, and he bought. I think he put $5 billion in lent to Goldman Sachs, and in a couple of years turned into $20 billion. And then a couple of years later, he bought a big chunk of Bank of America. And I remember seeing, the financial experts saying, well, he might have got it right with Goldman Sachs, but this time he hasn't.
Yeah.
They listed all the problems with Bank of America, and a couple of years later, he quadrupled his money.
Yep.
He's just sold out of Apple after making 900%. He looks at things differently. He doesn't run with the herd. When probably a lot of your listeners are too young, but I remember back in 2000, 60 Minutes used to be on 6:30 every Sunday night, and they had him going around Silicon Valley talking to the young people, and he wasn't in any tech shares, and they were all laughing at him how much money they've made, and he just looked at them and said, listen, if I don't understand it, I don't invest in it.
Right.
I drink Coca-Cola every day. We're the largest shareholder in Coca-Cola. I have McDonald's for breakfast every day. We're the largest shareholder in McDonald's.
Yep.
Men shave every day. Largest shareholder in Gillette. If I don't understand it, I don't invest.
Right.
They all laughed at him. A couple of months later, the NASDAQ crashed, and it didn't get back to that level until 2021. It took 21 years.
Was that the .com?
The .com crash.
Yep.
So he looks at things differently,
Yep.
acts on it, and he's prepared to take criticism of other people who have an opinion. So anyway, I'm not saying I'm a Warren Buffett, but we've been a counter-cyclical investor.
Yep.
We're a big buyer in the GFC, in the aftermath of the GFC, buying off the big institutional buyers.
Yep.
We were then a seller probably in the late teens. And in 2022, we spent about $800 million. We bought Casuarina Square up here, which is the largest single shopping centre holding since, I think, 2010.
Yep.
And then we bought Caneland Shopping Centre in Mackay, which is a similar size shopping centre to Casuarina Square. So we bought those off the institutional owners when they were nervous and thought that that retail was coming to an end, that online was going to be it was going to be the be-all and end-all, which I just was not a believer in.
Okay.
And I'm still not a believer in it.
Right.
It has a.
It's changing though, isn't it?
Well,
but
it has a niche, but if you have a look at and analyse online shopping, it isn't cheaper.
Okay.
Most of the things you see online, you can actually buy it cheaper in a shop.
Is that right?
What it has is convenience. Now, you can get it delivered to home. So if you're in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, you can get it delivered the next day. I was actually in Vale skiing in January, and I bought a watch online. I bought it in the afternoon. It actually was delivered the next morning before lunchtime in Vale. And I come from the other side of America, you think, holy bloody hell. Anyway, the further you get away from the capital cities, you then don't have that convenience.
Yep.
If you order something online in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, you can get it probably the next day or the day after. You do it up here and you're a week. So if there's no price advantage and then there's no convenience to it, then what does it have? It doesn't have anything.
Yep.
And then while online boomed during the GFC, of course it has to boom when people can't leave home. How else are they going to get what they bloody want? Excuse me. So, but what it did is it got a lot of people to realise they don't like online shopping. Something turns up, it's the wrong colour. It's the wrong size.
It doesn't fit, yeah.
It wasn't the quality that I thought. And, and a lot of the online companies actually don't make money because they have to do the free return and all that other stuff. So it's there's actually a lot of holes in it.
Yep.
And just a few years ago, Amazon closed one of their centres in Brooklyn, which was their last mile outlets. They closed that because it wasn't. A lot of them, they just expanded too much during COVID.
Right.
And they thought the boom was going to keep going, and it didn't. Now, as I say, there's certainly a market for it, but years ago they used to have, the people in the rural areas would have there'd be magazines come out and they would shop online, but it would arrive by post. Yep. When I was a kid, they used to have comics, and you could buy sea monkeys and bloody bullworkers and all these. Yep. So there's always been a certain amount of shopping where you didn't have to go into the supermarkets or stores. It has changed, but people like to go comparison shopping, and when you get into these northern areas, I've been to 104 countries, done every country in Asia. And when you go through a lot of those Asian countries, you would see the Asians. You think, why are they shopping all the bloody time? What's wrong with them? Yeah,
well, that amazed me about Singapore. Was that?
Well, when you start doing due diligence on a shopping centre like Casuarina Square, and when it's 35 degrees on a Saturday morning and 90% humidity, you don't go for a jog. You don't go to play golf.
Yep.
You don't go down the beach. What do? You go to the shopping centre. And you're there most of the day. So you've got to have a big shopping centre. You can't, it's no good just going to a Woolies with half a dozen specialties. You need where you can go and have breakfast. You can then have a lunch with someone. You can do a bit of shopping. You can go to the movies. You can spend the day there. So then you realise in Asia it's so hot, and a lot of them live in units, small units. So what do? So they go to the shopping centre.
Right.
So when you start to see that, it's really a social thing, and particularly in the warmer areas, that's why the shopping centres go much better.
Yep.
And also because they're further from the capital cities, you don't have the convenience with the online and all that. So it's a different psyche. It's completely different. But it's one of the reasons why we're very long in retail in Northern Australia.
Okay. And how's Casuarina Square been going? Given we have had a lot of social issues up here. Casuarina, unfortunately, is always in the headlines with kids causing trouble there, fighting, that whole thing. Has that been an unintended sort of feature of your acquisition, or were you sort of always aware of those sort of periphery social issues when you bought Casuarina?
Well, they were there.
Yep.
They didn't just appear after we bought it. And the security budget is $2.4 million a year, so it's substantial.
Right.
In Queensland, security for a shopping centre of that size is about $6 to $7 per square metre of lettable area.
Right.
Casuarina Square is 42. So you can see the difference.
Right.
So that's what it was when we bought it. So, but it's there certainly needs some action taken, and it's and I suppose it comes down to the judiciary and the government. The judiciary can only put in the laws that the government enact.
Yep.
and people say there's too many people in jail. Well, at least while they're in jail, they're not doing crime.
Mm-hmm.
And there's too much concern about the people who commit the crime rather than the average public.
Right.
And I know, it's not an easy solution.
Yep.
But people should be able to go about their day-to-day life without the fear of being attacked for no reason whatsoever. And I think there's no excuses. They should just be locked up. I know there's other issues, but they've got to be sorted out. But that doesn't mean they should be able to wander around the streets and just do whatever they like. So it's a problem. Since we took it over, we've put on canine patrols, which have worked pretty well.
So you've increased security since you've come in.
Yep. But we've had we had a couple of weeks earlier in the year where there was no thefts in the centre at all.
Wow.
But then there was a riot at Dondale and let half of them out, and that a lot of them come to Casuarina.
Yep.
Now, Casuarina Square, people have got to remember, we get 8.4 million visitors a year. Mm-hmm. There's 140,000 people in Darwin. Every man, woman and child in Darwin comes to Casuarina Square 5.1 times a month.
Right.
So the chance of us having issues are probably slightly higher than other places. But when you hear a lot of things at Casuarina, there's a lot happen at the bus stop, which actually isn't. When you say Casuarina, people assume it's Casuarina Square Shopping Centre.
Sure, yeah.
And a lot of time it isn't. It's out in the car parks, it's over near the swimming, it's something else. But Casuarina, people think it's Casuarina Square. Our security team do an absolutely fantastic job. But under the current laws, people can't always do what they'd like to do to stop some of these issues.
Yep. And when you increase security detail, how do you manage the relationships with your tenants? Because I'm sure if you're increasing security costs, that must be borne by some way by the tenants in Casuarina. How do you sort of manage those relationships and those difficult type of conversations? Well,
at the end of the day, tenants can only pay a certain percentage of their turnover.
Yep.
Now, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you have no security. They can't pay any more rent. Mm-hmm. If the rent gets too high, they just have to move. So what it means is, as the shopping centre owner, you get a smaller return. Now, some of the shops have their own security. So, you have to look at their total occupancy costs. So that will mean that they can pay less rent. So it's certainly an issue. But we opened a new store last week called JD Sport.
I've seen that.
Yeah, 60th store in Australia, and it's one of their smaller modules, but it has a fantastic frontage.
Yep.
And I think they're doing about double what their budget was. So it's done very well. So
fantastic.
Our one of our focuses as a landlord is to keep putting new tenants and making it interesting.
Yep.
People won't spend money if it's not interesting. So we've got another half dozen new tenants coming over the next 6 months.
Yep.
So we really can't get people to visit our shopping centre. 5.1 times a month for everyone. And I know there's people that don't go, but there's someone else who's going 10 times.
Yep.
And there's some older gentlemen, some of our Greek friends who are there every day.
Having coffee.
Yeah, one of these fellows, he was telling me the other day that he arrived here in 1955 at 19 when there's 3,500 people in Darwin. So there's been some changes.
Yep, a bit different.
So that's where they meet every day and have a few coffees. And so it's a real community centre. So it's very important to Darwin. And we so it's not all just about the shopping. You've got to keep it interesting and make the air conditioning and everything right for everyone who visits the centre. So it's
So just staying on the sort of the social unrest issue, just quickly, we're obviously being in so close to a Northern Territory general election. Have you had many conversations with the major political parties, any kind of maybe independent candidates about what sort of policies they might be rolling out should they win government? And have you sort of liked what you've seen in the lead up to this August 24 election?
When you're a larger landlord, and particularly of centre like Casuarina Square.
Because you do hold sway, obviously, massive sway.
Well, I don't know about massive sway, but we normally can get meetings with them and talk to them because it's a very important part of the community.
Right.
So, we find the politicians here quite good to deal with, but they have their hands tied by the particular leanings of their parties.
Sure.
So at times they can say what they really think, but at the end of the day, you've got to get legislation through, and it's we have the same problem in Queensland. it certainly appears that the judiciary is more concerned with the rights of the criminals than they are of the public.
Right.
We've seen plenty of people. I was talking to a woman the other day at Casuarina Square, and a friend of hers was hit over the head with a brick, won't ever work again, and that person was let off.
Right.
Now, it didn't happen at Casuarina Square. So they're the sort of things that happen. They feel sorry for someone who wasn't brought up well, and we all feel sorry for them.
Yep.
That doesn't give them the right to destroy someone's life. So there's some real issues there, and I certainly feel sorry for the police. They do their best, but then they go and the judge or the magistrate, whoever, will be lenient on the person, and they're out again.
Yeah.
So I think the police have the most difficult job. And we had one got out of Dondale a couple of months ago, and it took six security to get them under control. If they then get hurt, you're then in trouble for hurting them. Well, when you've got six people it's a lot of force, and accidents happen, but the judiciary don't seem to be too concerned with that. So it's a real issue for the whole of the territory, and you just have to have a look what's happening with the population.
Yep.
It is not growing.
Yeah. I think crime is going to be a massive thing. I think housing is also another thing which might be a bit more relevant to your expertise. The Labor Party and the Liberals have both rolled out sort of quite generous packages for first homeowners, first builders, things of that nature, 50 and 60 grand sort of numbers. How do you sort of see that affecting maybe I know the residential property market's probably not your main wheelhouse, but given that particularly the anti-housing market's been fairly stagnant over the last few years in comparison to the sort of eastern seaboard and other southern states, how do you sort of see that impacting the housing market? Do you think it'll have the effect that they're looking for? Do you think it'll attract people to the territory, which is I know part of the reason for them offering such generous packages? How do you sort of see that playing out?
What drives property prices generally is demand.
Right.
Demand comes from increase in population. So there's no increase in population in the Northern Territory. It's actually decreased over the last 12 months from figures I've seen.
Yep.
Different people can pull out of different figures out of different places of their body. But the figures I've seen, they're going down. So you make it easy for first-home buyers or home builders to build a new house. So they move from a rental house or an older house into a new one. Then what happens to that older house when there's not an increase in population? There's not a need for it. So your prices aren't going to grow.
Right.
So that's you've got to get that sorted. Now, we have gone to the government with some proposals to increase housing.
Okay.
One of the problems we've got all over Australia is a massive shortage of tradies, of subbies. Your costs of construction are enormous. We've come up with some solutions for that. But it's not easy, and we get a very good ear from the government. We have found that once we get to the public service, to say nothing happens would be an overstatement. It would be too complimentary. It is just, we've been working on a particular project for 2 years. We keep getting told, yes, it's coming out, yes, it's coming out. And I know that the ministers and chief ministers are doing their absolute best. But at the end of the day, the public servants have a role to play, and it just doesn't happen. Now, I don't think it's because there's a shortage of public servants.
Okay.
These days, I think it's difficult if they don't perform, it's difficult to do much about it.
Yep.
But there's some action that could be taken, and it just hasn't been done. I'm not blaming the government. They've always been quite willing to participate, but you've got to have the public service on board. And I sent something off yesterday to someone there, and we met a month ago, and nothing has happened at all. Not even a phone call, an email, a bunch of flowers.
Is that because we're in an election cycle? Do you think it's a bit late? No.
Well, given nothing happened the previous 2 years,
Okay.
I don't think the last month has changed.
Right.
I think what we show, there's consistency there.
Okay. So how do we then stimulate, that increased demand the increased, for lack of a better word, production of tradies, to bring building costs down, all that sort of thing? Is that through offering the tradespeople with businesses maybe more generous tax breaks, increasing TAFE, free TAFE, I think is already a thing. Is that the sort of line of thinking we need to go down? Are we already doing it? Are we not doing enough? Are you able to go into some of this
think
detail?
And I don't want to oversimplify it because it's a chicken and the egg. We can't get more tradies if they don't have somewhere to live.
Right.
And it's got to be quality housing. If you're going to be bringing people up who are getting paid quite a lot of money, and in all fairness, so we've got a lot of money invested here. I think if you go through people in Australia and ask for their top 2 or 3 places to live, the biggest percentage probably aren't saying Darwin. So there's only so much money you can pay people. And I think, if people could get 200,000 in Brisbane or 200,000 in Darwin, majority of people would be in Brisbane.
Yep.
But then there's still only so much you can pay someone. If they can't get quality housing where they can bring their family, they're just not going to come up.
Right.
And that's a problem. You have to have that quality housing, and the government needs to do something about that to build housing. So if they were to bring a new department head up, you can take them out and say, well, here's 3 or 4 houses you can pick from. You pick whichever one you want, and your family can move up in a couple of weeks' time.
Yep.
That's what you need to do. It's no good getting someone to come up here, try and put him in a hotel for 12 months, then trying to build a house.
Yep.
That's not how you keep families together. And you want families to put down roots, stay here and enjoy it. Because Darwin is quite a good place, and there's an enormous future here. We wouldn't have invested $600 million if we weren't a believer, and we're going to continue to invest. But things have to change to get that happening, and it's the money's around from the federal government, and we've seen there's been money allocated, but it just hasn't been spent.
Right. So I think there's another component to that. So if we say we build the quality housing that's there for people to bring their families up and live in, is there enough work on up here? Is there a big enough pipeline of work that people then, because you can't just live in a house, you need a meaningful job to provide for your family. In your opinion, is there enough work up here to sustain that?
Most employers we talk to have trouble getting people.
Right.
Without repeating, it's a chicken and the egg.
Yep.
Do you have the housing first, or do you have the people?
Okay.
Well, unless you have the housing, the people can't move here.
Yep.
So we need to have some housing, and you need to have different variety. There'll be 1-bedroom units for people who want to be close to town, and then you'll have 1-bedroom houses in town. You'll have 4-bedroom houses out in the suburbs with 3 bathroom. So you've got to have the variety. As I say, if you can get 200,000 in Brisbane or 200,000 in Darwin, why are you going to come here?
Yep.
Now you can say, well, instead of 200,000 in Brisbane, we'll pay 300,000 here. But what about their family? A lot of people have families. I know we have different people these days, but you've got to have it available for them. They can't come up and live in a hotel with 2 or 3 kids, or but even a couple. It's all right for a weekend or a week in a hotel unit, but you can't put down roots and you can't make it a home. Mm-hmm. So there are bigger projects coming up here, Santos and some of the other big projects, and these naval things that are happening. Well, where are they going to live? Do you wait till they get here then build houses? That's not the way to do it.
Okay.
From a government, I've put solutions to them how these things can be funded, and you build housing, and so at least when the people come up, there is somewhere for them to live.
Yep. We talked before about you starting Sentinel Group in the middle of basically a global financial crisis, and it seems to me that, from what you've said earlier, that part of Sentinel's strategy is investing in challenging markets when other people are unwilling to do so. Do you see that as applicable for somewhere like Darwin? As obviously the market I think is a little bit softer, like I said before, than maybe our southern cousins. Is that how you sort of see Darwin included in your strategy? It's a market really that maybe a lot of people don't like at the moment, so that's the time to invest in Darwin. And then I guess added to that, do you see Darwin improving over the next, say, 5, 10, 20 years that will bring those returns that you're looking for?
Well, Warren Buffett says you've got to be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful.
Yes.
And that's certainly what we've done. When over the last few years, when property prices were crazy, we weren't a buyer. During COVID, when the big boys were a bit concerned about retail because of how well online shopping was going.
Yep.
We bought 2 of the largest shopping centres in Australia, and that's worked out very well.
Wow.
And we first bought in Darwin, I think in 2017, 2016, when Impex had pulled out. So we didn't buy at the bottom of the market, but it was pretty close.
Yep.
So yes, we like to buy when people are running away from something. We like to run towards it.
Sure.
So, I'm a believer in Darwin, and certainly over years to come, it will be a very good economy. But it hasn't done anything for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
And I've spoken to people who are just leaving. They're sick of the crime. They're sick of a number of other things. And I know while there are some people moving, some people coming here, there certainly does appear to be more people leaving. So that will change because the potential is certainly here in the Northern Territory. It is. This is all of Northern Australia, from Mackay North. That's where we're the largest investors.
Yep.
Townsville is just enormous, and it is just absolutely booming. Darwin certainly isn't booming. But we've got a major investments here, so we've certainly got to keep investing. We're about to spend another 40 million at Casuarina Square on the quarter, and some doing a new Woolworths and some other things. So we're going to continue to invest.
Yep.
We're a believer in the Northern Territory, but we need, whether people like it or not, the Australian economy could not survive without the taxes and royalties we get from coal, iron ore, and natural gas.
Yep.
Now, there's plenty of people who don't like it, but we couldn't run the schools, we couldn't run the hospitals, we couldn't run the police. There's just no chance in the world. The whole place, I don't know what we'd do.
Yep.
No one wants pollution, and I'm not saying we should have any pollution, but you can get zero emission coal-fired power stations, and there's a way to manage it. But there's some people who just don't want anything to do with it. Our advantage in Australia is our natural resources.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the moment, they're wanting to get into the Australian-made, trying to get that going. Now, we just had a factory that we own in Townsville. They closed their manufacturing 2 weeks ago after 60 years.
Yep.
Because the cost of electricity was just that high. They couldn't operate of an afternoon. Now we see television ads, how great renewables and all this is, and the demand, and how fantastic, how cheap. Can you say bullshit on this?
Yeah,
You
please.
can? Okay.
Let it rip.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, then that's absolute bullshit,
Yep.
because we're certainly not seeing that. The price just, not only the prices go up, but the reliability. So what the government does is cut off the electricity to manufacturers and businesses.
Is that brownouts? Is that what brownouts are?
Yeah.
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 Yep.
So it's just destroyed the manufacturing. Yet you've got the federal government saying we're going to start Australian-made. Well, you've got factories closing.
Yep.
Your only plastic manufacturer, the last one closed in Greater Sydney area about 6 months ago because of the cost of electricity. So that's where they need to focus.
Yep.
Now-
We've got an ocean of gas underneath us, and
Now-
which is a transition fuel, right?
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, I say I don't want any pollution.
Yep.
I'm not saying we should have pollution, but we have to have an economy where you can create jobs and gradually work towards renewables. Whether it's nuclear, whatever it is.
Yep.
But at the moment, businesses are leaving the country, and like this factory in Townsville, they made cardboard boxes from Mackay North and all the Northern Territory.
Yep.
It's now closed. The average tenure of the workers there was 21 years. 21 years average. You had people there, their sons,
Yep.
their grandsons, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunties. And the reason they stayed there is because security. They said, we're always going to need cardboard boxes. Well, because of the great success of renewables,
Yep.
that factory could not operate most afternoons, and they've had to close.
And the Albanese government said that we're going to be $235 cheaper on our bills. But I find it very hard to reconcile that when it seems like the higher the penetration of renewables in any given power system, almost equivocally guarantees that you're going to be paying a higher price for your utilities as well. So,
well, that's what we've seen, Stuart, to date. That's certainly how it's been, and they can argue something else, but that has been the facts. And when you've got manufacturers actually closing down, and now the Queensland government is paying a massive subsidy to Rio Tinto for electricity at Gladstone to keep the alumina factory going. So Anyway, it's all too depressing, Stuart. So
Well, we'll move off. We'll move off renewables. What was I? There was something else I was going to talk about. Oh, so you talked about the commodity side of things. Are we too much of a one speed economy? Are we too the old houses and holes trope? I think we're in the OECD countries, which is the Office of Economic. OEC, Office of Economic Complexity. They rank us about 73 out of the 130 member countries. Are we putting too much of an emphasis on the housing market and the resources side of things? Like, I understand the royalties and everything that comes from it. That's great. But are we maybe putting too much emphasis on that? And by doing so, we leave ourselves open to changes in world markets. If China wants to stop buying our iron ore, we're in a little bit of trouble. If China wants to stop buying our coal, we're in a little bit of trouble. Do we need to diversify our portfolio, as it were? What do you think?
I think we're diversified now.
Okay.
Yeah, you talk about iron ore. We have coal. We have beef. We have wheat. We have wool. We have tourism. I don't know if there's any country that is completely immune from issues.
Yeah.
Some of the countries' advantage is purely labour. If you look like a place like South Korea, Taiwan, where I don't think they have any natural resources. They import all the gas, import everything. It's quite a wealthy country.
Yep.
But because we are so fortunate with our natural resources, that the labour issues that we have here, you've seen with the CFMEU, and I don't begrudge anyone getting paid well, but I do begrudge people who just won't work and still expect to be paid extremely well.
Yep.
So we've got very bad work practices in Australia. So when you talk about world rankings, I was looking the other day, so JBS, which is the largest meatworks protein company in the world, Australia's the most expensive for slaughtering cattle because of the bad work practices. So
when you say bad, does that just mean over-regulated, or what does that mean exactly?
Well, I wouldn't like to say over-regulated because we certainly want to have clean, safe things.
Sure.
But just how hard they work, the hours they have, what they get paid,
right.
the sick days, all the other stuff. Now there's a lot of people hard workers, but there's too many people who just look at the CFMEU. It's just disgraceful. We in Queensland, we cannot build any high rise in the city. We cannot build any offices. The cost, we don't know what the cost is because we've taken a floor in a new building getting built in the city. It was started 3 years ago, and in January they work 4 days. So you have no idea how much it's going to cost.
Right.
So how do you start building something when you don't know what it's going to cost to finish? So to say we're reliant on our natural resources, well, that's the only advantage we've got because we don't have an advantage in labour. We do have a fairly highly skilled workforce.
Yep.
But they don't. A lot of them aren't hard workers. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there will have 3 jobs, they work 60 hours a week and all that sort of stuff. Well, I've done all of that, so I'm no sympathy from me.
Doing it currently.
Yeah. But I think whatever country you are, Stuart, you've got to take advantage of what you have best. So ours are our natural resources. And I say it's not just, iron ore comes off. That doesn't mean coal comes off. We've got wheat, we've got sheep, we've got beef, we've got, and the amount of Queensland government is putting copper string 2 out to Mount Isa.
Okay.
Now, Mount Isa, as I've been told, is the second most expensive electricity in the world, behind the Democratic Republic of Congo, another great Labor place. But they've got a proven mining resources of over $500 billion in the Mount Isa Minerals Province. Now, you've got to get electricity out there so that you can process it to a certain stage. Then you ship it out through the Port of Townsville that they're currently widening the shipping channel from 92 metres to 180 metres. And then there'll be some manufacturing in some of that, with the sun cable thing up here. They're talking about building all the solar panels at Lansdowne, which is about 40 kilometres inland from Townsville because of the high quality silica. So we're certainly not a one-speed economy. We have a lot of mineral resources, but we have great distances to take them.
Yep.
I think we've got the second largest phosphate deposit in the world, and they need phosphate to for agriculture, for growing crops to feed the world. So, we can be 73rd out of 130-something countries, but I think Australia's got one of the fastest population growth, so they may sit over there in the snow and think it's fantastic, but the people are moving to Australia because of all the great benefits it has.
Yeah, well, maybe I might have been a bit strong on the one-speed economy part of that, but what I was sort of trying to get at maybe is by diversifying, can we maybe do better at capturing value maybe downstream from our coal, downstream from our mineral resources? Instead of sending iron ore over to China, I don't know if you've probably heard of the iron boomerang and things like that, where we're build power plants in northeastern Queensland, build them in the Kimberley, and then build a big railway, and we send iron ore and coal across the same railway, and then maybe we can sell iron ingots instead of iron ore or whatever to China. Is there any merit to the idea of value adding or capturing that extra value instead of sending it offshore?
Terrific merit to that, Stuart. If only you could do it. I've just told you about the factories that are closing down.
Yep.
To do these things, you've got to have workers in the factories.
Right.
They don't, and we saw that when General Motors closed down, and Toyota closed down in Adelaide. You had some of the head fellows for Toyota out here at the time when they were tossing up, do we close or do we keep it open?
Yep.
And I think on the Monday was before. I think it was after the AFL Grand Final, and hardly anyone turned up on Monday. So they just, let's close it.
Yep. So
you've got those work practices. Now, I know there's a lot of very hard workers in Australia, but the trouble is that and everyone's entitled to have a safe workplace, get paid well. But the trouble that we've seen, like with the CFMEU, is people get to the stage where they think they're entitled to be paid for not working.
Right.
And that's why we don't have manufacturing here. Now, people can say whatever they like. Well, just go and have a look at the factories. And they wouldn't close down if it was going to be more expensive to do it overseas. Now, I know they say, well, they get cheap labour. Yes, but what you've said with we export iron ore, we export coal to all these countries, then they manufacture it and bring it back here. So all that shipping.
Yep.
So, yes, we should be able to make it work even with higher labour costs. But you were saying we do a power plant in the Kimberleys and one in North Queensland. Well, you're trying to get a bloody power plant done with the greenies.
Yeah.
They don't want anything to happen.
Right.
Yet, if it's the wind turbines, like up in the Atherton Tablelands, you can put bulldozers through and just knock down a rainforest to do wind turbines. But that's probably another story.
Yep.
So anyway,
a lot of hypocrisy there. So how then? What's the antidote here? Because is it legislation? So do we need gas reservation policies to make building those power plants I'm talking about cheaper? What's the remedy to this? We can see what the roadblocks are. What's the antidote here?
Shit.
We've only got 10 minutes left.
It's like solving the crime problem.
Right.
There's no overnight solution.
Yep.
It's very complex. You've got to have the political will. But when most political parties are only looking to the next election, how do we get re-elected? And then with Labor are supported so much by the Greens, and you see some of the policies that they do at the moment. You think, and I'm thinking federally.
Yep.
That they're really not Labor policies, but in order to get the preference off the Greens, they've got to do that.
Right.
So you have to have the political will to do it.
Yep.
And I was just reading something last night in an online Fin Review. Out of all the promises that the Prime Minister Albanese made right up to the election, there's very few of them he's got through. Now, a lot of them are sitting in the Senate or something, they're negotiating. So he can try his best, but he's got to get other parties on side. I'm not blaming him for it, but that's, you've got to have the political will from enough people to get it through.
Yep.
Sometimes the opposition, whether it's right or not, they just want to spoil it because they don't want you to get up and have success. So I don't know how we get it.
Well,
how we get it done.
Does that then beg the question? Does our political system need a shake up? Do we need longer terms? Dare I say it? A lot of people would be terrified of that notion of longer political terms due to obviously someone not getting in that they find palatable. Is that something, some sort of radical thinking?
Well,
that we
our
haven't
last
really
election
considered?
in Queensland, it was decided, or prior to that election, that it would be a 4-year fixed term. So whoever won last time got 4 years fixed. Now that's up, I think this is October. So I think that certainly is a better way so people know how long they've got.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure whatever you do, Stuart, there's no perfect solution.
Mm-hmm.
But you have a look at with Peter Dutton at the moment. He's come up with the idea of nuclear power plants. Now,
Yes.
a lot of people are against that, but United Nations have I can't think of what it's called now, but there was out of 15 major nations by 2050 they have to triple their generation of electricity by nuclear power.
Yep.
Now I think out of all the top 20 OECD, we're the only one that doesn't have nuclear. So are we right and all those are wrong? I don't think so.
Yep.
You've seen what's happened in Germany.
Yep.
They shut down their coal-fired power stations, put in wind turbines and solar, and now they've got to buy nuclear
From
power
France.
from France.
Yep. Yep.
So I think it does seem the only way to go.
Yep.
And yes, it's expensive, but what they haven't, the people against it, no one will take into account that they say that renewables is cheaper, but renewables doesn't last as long. I've got solar panels on the shed at my farm now. They lasted 7 years. I had to have them replaced.
Yep.
Nuclear is 80 or 100 years, whatever it is. So, they're talking about an initial installation,
Yep.
but not the long term. But also, as we know, with solar and wind, if the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't blow, we don't have any. So you've got to have backup.
Yep.
Now, whether that's coal or whether that's gas, you just got to have backup. So it costs you double, where if you have all nuclear, you don't need any backup. If you have solar and wind, you still have to have a backup.
Yeah, overbuild and firming and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
don't you?
so
Yep.
it's if you can get geothermal, I know down South Australia there's some great locations for geothermal. The trouble is it's so far down, they've ended up breaking their drills, and I think they've given up. Well, they'll probably get there eventually as technology improves, but that's our electricity is just too expensive. It's too unreliable, and you've just got political parties trying to score points. So it's but of the 104 countries I've been to, Stuart, I don't want to live in any other country.
Yeah, I agree. I've travelled extensively myself, and Australia's my home and always will be. But yeah, there's so much more potential to the place, and we're just not realising, unfortunately.
Well, there's a saying in the racing industry that a champion will be a champion in spite of its trainer.
Right.
Now, if you have a look at the Farlap movie, you may not have seen that. Now, from that, the trainer was absolutely hopeless, but it was a champion horse. So it didn't matter how bad the trainer was. I think that's the same with Australia.
So we can persevere.
Well, Australia will be a great place, irrespective of who's in government. But if we had good government, how much better would it be?
Yep, agreed. We'll finish soon. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what you sort of see given those set of circumstances. It doesn't really look like a great outlook from what I'm reading. But what do you see the main trends being in the future? I don't know if you want to talk about commercial real estate, residential real estate, the economy in general. What are the things that the Sentinel Property Group are going to be looking at, say, the next 5-10 years?
We've never been a real buyer of commercial office space. While we own 3 in Darwin, and of the 3 we own makes us a fairly substantial owner here. But in Brisbane, our hometown, we only own 1. So out of a portfolio of over $2 billion,
right,
we only have 1 there, and a property that's probably worth about $110 million. I intend to buy the best part of $1 billion there over the next 12 months.
Wow.
We have the Olympics coming up in 2032. So out of from every action, there's a reaction. Because of you can't build anything at the moment or in the foreseeable future in Brisbane, it's going to get worse because we will have to start on the Olympics. The current government has such a major infrastructure book, $96 billion, and we don't have enough tradies. So, government projects are normally cost plus. Builders will do that because they can't lose money. Where in commercial projects, that doesn't happen. There has to be some form of fixed price or formula.
Yep.
So our population's growing. Brisbane's the fastest growing major capital city in the world, according to JLL research.
Right.
Rents are going up. Lease incentives are going down. For every per head of population, you need about 1 square metre of office space. So there's 27 million people in Australia. we have 25 million square metres of office space. So as the population continues to grow in Brisbane, we need more office space, but you can't build it.
Okay.
Therefore, rents are going up.
Yep.
And a lot of people will not buy in a location if they don't know where it is. Now, I imagine you know where Brisbane is, Stuart.
Been there a few times.
But there'd be a lot of people overseas who've heard of it.
Sure.
You know, I've done a lot of travellers, as you said you have. So when they hear you've got an Australian accent, which I know we don't have an accent, they do, but that's another discussion. They'll say you're from Sydney.
Sydney.
No.
Yep.
You're from Melbourne. No. Or where? Brisbane.
Perth sometimes.
Yep. But over the next 8 years, pretty much everyone in the world with a television or any form of social media is going to know about Brisbane. Mm-hmm. Well, when people come to Brisbane, it's a pretty nice place.
Beautiful.
So the demand for a Brisbane office from investors will increase.
Okay.
We've had a very substantial downturn in the prices of property in Brisbane, and that's really brought about by the Melbourne CBD is in a terrible situation. It's got a decade ahead of it before it recovers, at least.
Wow.
So the big investors, they can't sell in Melbourne. They really don't want to sell in Sydney because it's too hard to get back into. So
just quickly, what do you put that down to in Melbourne? Is that government policy that's created that, or is it other extenuating circumstances?
Chairman Dan, they had 8 months of working from home. They got used to that. Mm-hmm. And as the current Premier said, while the New South Wales Premier is telling government workers they've got to go back to work, I think at least 4 days a week or whatever, the Victorian government said we're not going to force our people to go back to work. So you've got such enormous vacancies there.
Airbnb as well factored into it?
Well, they've got the budget last year that they brought down was just horrendous. Increased workers' compensation, increased all insurances. That the tax-free threshold for land tax went from 300,000 down to 50,000. So you had plenty of housing units that you paid no land tax. That 50,000 pretty much covers everything.
Yep.
So why would you open a business in Melbourne or Victoria if you didn't have to?
And that's the little guy getting stepped on, isn't it?
That's right. There's a fellow I was talking to. He's got a little office building. He gets 110,000 a year in rent. His land tax has now gone to 50,000. So almost half of the total rent. Now Queensland, it hasn't got that bad because the government increased the coal royalties to the highest in the world, and they got an extra 15 billion.
Yeah.
And the Greenies want to shut down coal. How do we survive? Anyway, so when you have a look at it, the reasons to invest in CB office in Brisbane are compelling.
Okay.
At the moment, I think 2023 there was about a bit over $4 trillion in superannuation funds in Australia. Superannuation funds typically have between 7 and 9% of their portfolio invested in commercial property.
Okay.
Now, between now and 2030, superannuation funds are predicted to go from about 4 trillion to 6.5 trillion. Now, even in COVID, superannuation grows every week. You can't stop the damn thing. It's like a vicious cancer. Mm-hmm. So in order for those super funds to keep their weighting of that 7 to 9%, they've got to buy another $380 billion worth of property between now and 2030. Mm. Now, I can't see them building more in Melbourne because there's such an oversupply.
Yep.
The cost of construction don't allow to build it in Brisbane. Sydney, they've got a few under construction, but I don't think they'll start anymore because they've got the same issues down there.
Yep. So
what happens to property prices? They've got to go up.
Yep.
Now, properties that we're selling for on a 3.5%, 4% yield, well, one we're buying at the moment, Edward Street, Brisbane, at a 9.34% yield. Now, that's an unheard of yield for a CBD property. That's a really nice little property. Replacement cost is 140 million.
Yep.
We're paying 72. We're going long Brisbane.
Yep.
As I say, and it's not just because I live there. Mm-hmm. At the moment, we've only had one there because I could not see the value, but there is such compelling value. We'll just buy whatever we can at what we think is a very good price. And we don't want things with long leases. We want something where the leases are going to run out, in 28, 29, 30, so you can get a new lease before the Olympics and sell it in the run-up to the Olympics. So never been easier making money.
Wow. So just quickly, how is the Reserve Bank policy going to impact on, you said we're going to buy whatever we can. Is that to a certain limit of interest rates? How does that play into the Sentinel strategy?
We don't control the Reserve Bank. You may think otherwise, Stuart, but I can assure you we don't.
You're not a part of the cabal?
We don't completely control it. Anyway.
All right.
Yeah, you have to form a view
Yep.
on everything and take a stance, where too many people sit on the sidelines and then 12 months' time. So I thought that was a good idea. I was going to do that. You've actually got to do things. I follow the Commonwealth Bank chief economist, being Commonwealth Bank have the largest mortgage book, residential mortgage book in Australia. Mm-hmm. They have more credit cards than any other financial institution in Australia. They have more savings accounts than any other bank in Australia. So they have better access to financial information than the Reserve Bank does.
Right.
They know, they can see how people are chewing through their savings from 55 billion down to 28 billion in under 12 months to pay their current mortgages and groceries. So it can't keep going. So when the chief economist of CBA says we'll get a interest rate cut in November and 2 more before June 30 next year, I'm going with CBA.
Right.
Now, the RBA, we know that you can't believe them, because we were told that interest rates weren't going to go up until 2024 or something. So
I believe them when,
Yep.
when they said that, and that's cost me a lot of money.
Well, it's cost a lot of people. So I think now when they're saying, well, they're actually not saying there's going to be an interest rate rise. They're very cautious what they say, but I think they're trying to make people believe there could be one. And with that, to try and stop spending, to try and slow things down.
Inflation.
In
Yep.
Queensland, we've had the desperate Labor government give people $1,000 off their power bill, up until Christmas, whatever it is.
Yep.
They've cut public transport fares to 50 cents from August till January, all just in the election cycle, just absolutely disgraceful. All of that adds to inflation. If you don't have to spend that $1,000 on electricity, you've got $1,000 to spend on something else. Now, yes, we need to help people, but the best thing would have been to have electricity costs that were fair and reasonable
In the first place.
and then they wouldn't have had that issue.
Correct.
So, yes, if your electricity price goes up, well, you've got to earn more money to pay for it, that's what inflation is all about, increasing prices and increasing wages, and then you've got to get another pay rise. So I'm going with the CBA, and we're banking on that. We are buying. Now, hey, if we get another interest rate rise, that might be a bit of a nuisance, but what that will do is really crunch the commercial property, so it'll become cheaper.
Okay.
So we'll buy more.
So there'll be opportunities.
Yep. So I'm a believer. I just don't think that there will be. There's you speak to people down in Sydney, and particularly in the Western Sydney, where there's a lot of $1 million mortgages from average workers. Husband and wife are working bloody hard. It would just push them too far. So when you've got the savings of Australian people have gone down from 55 billion to 28 billion in under 12 months, it can't go much longer. So I think there's a lot of pain out there with people, and we're seeing insolvencies in small businesses. So I've made my stance.
Yep.
And I'm sticking to it.
All right. Well, we'll see where the dust settles. Warren Ebert, understand you're a busy man, mate, so we'll let you go, but we really appreciate your time. And all the best with the Sentinel Group, and onwards and upwards. And we hope to see you again in Darwin soon.
We're up here every month, Stuart. Look forward to it. Thanks
Awesome.
very much.
Thanks, mate.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.